A few months ago, I was in Brooklyn digging into the Winslow family's orphanages. I had heard the whispers, strange happenings, missing children. I thought my research would be fascinating, but I never stopped thinking about it. I moved into a small apartment near what looked like old orphanage buildings. They loomed over me like ghosts. I spent hours in the local library. The air was thick and dusty. While searching for clues, I found a journal that belonged to a lady who worked there. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. My stomach twisted as I opened it. The entry I read spoke of strange sounds at night, something that sounded like laughter. The journal ended abruptly. It gave me chills, like someone was watching me. I asked people in the neighborhood about the orphanages. Most just shook their heads and turned away. I talked to an elderly woman who looked haunted. When I mentioned the orphanages, her eyes darkened. I wanted to think it was my imagination, but deep down, I felt something was off. One night, I heard it outside my window. Laughter. It wasn't cheerful. It felt wrong. I wanted to look outside, but I couldn't move. The laughter echoed in the silence. I thought about the orphanages. My heart raced as panic set in. A few days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. There was no return address. Inside, it was just names, children's names. I didn't know who they were, but it shook me. I searched for these names and uncovered the tragic stories tied to each one. The deeper I looked, the more I felt something dragging me in, making me question what really happened there. Shadows in my apartment got thicker. Sometimes I thought I saw figures fade away out of the corner of my eye. I started sleeping poorly, waking up to soft whispers that I couldn't understand. I didn't want to admit it, but I felt scared. Last week, I was at my desk in the afternoon when I heard a soft knock on my door. I opened it slowly. No one was there, just a quiet hallway. But there on the floor was a child's shoe, dusty and old, like it had been there for years. My heart skipped. It felt like someone wanted to tell me something. One evening, I saw a child's face peering in the window across the street. Their eyes were wide and sad. I stepped closer, but when I reached the window, they were gone. I wanted to shake it off, but something felt deeply wrong in the neighborhood. Then I got more letters, more names, more tragedies. My stomach twisted. Did some of these kids end up here? What happened to them? I felt like I had opened a door that should have stayed closed. I thought back to that journal and the laughter. Maybe I had uncovered something better left hidden. I was determined to find out the truth about the Winslow family's orphanages. But the more I uncovered, the more I felt I was losing myself. The shadows were closing in. I could feel it. Maybe it was a mistake to dig deeper. The next morning, I woke to a heavy fog hanging outside my window. The air felt thick, as if the world had turned muffled. I sat up, the child's shoe still haunting my thoughts. It was a strange relic, as if it had been dropped there for a reason, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to do something with it. I decided to revisit the library. I needed to find out more about the children who had been lost, those names swirling around in my head. I gathered my things and braced myself against the cold air as I stepped outside. Once inside, I made my way to the records room, a small corner tucked away between dusty shelves. I flipped through files for hours. The further I dug, the more I discovered about the orphanage's history. Many of the reports were routine, but there were whispers, lost children, mysterious disappearances, and parents who never came looking for them. Each entry chilled my bones further. Then I stumbled upon an old newspaper article. It described a fire at one of the Winslow orphanages, a tragedy that claimed lives. A name jumped out at me, Elizabeth Winslow. She was identified as the last caregiver before the fire. I needed to know more about her. Just then, the librarian approached me, her eyes darting nervously. "You should be careful with what you're looking into." Her voice trembled slightly. "The Winslows aren't a topic to take lightly." I felt a knot form in my stomach. Who was this woman? Why was she warning me? I mustered my courage. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "Just, some things are better left buried. Those children, they found new families, all of them." Her eyes bore into mine with great concern, but her words were confusing. New families? I thought of the letters with the names. As I considered her words, I noticed a movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned, but it was just a shadow passing by the shelf. I shook my head, trying to focus. I couldn't get distracted. I left the library that day with more questions than answers. The fog had thickened, turning the streets into a hazy labyrinth. As I walked, I felt as if the shadows were creeping along behind me, whispering secrets that couldn't reach my ears. That evening, as I sat down to compile my notes, the quiet was shattered by a series of loud knocks at my door. My heart hammered. I knew I shouldn't open it, but the knocking continued, insistent and frantic. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But lying there was another letter, this time sealed with wax, a child's drawing on the front. "Open it," a whisper echoed from somewhere behind me. But I was alone. My breath caught as I picked it up, almost afraid to break the seal. That's when I saw it. Inside was a photo, yellowed with age, of a group of children standing in front of a building that looked eerily familiar. Among them was the child I had seen at my window, her eyes wide and sad. My hands trembled as I stared at the photo. I could feel something dark unfurling in my stomach. I had to know who they were, and more importantly, what had happened to them. The sense that I was on the edge of something vast swept over me. But just as surely I felt myself being pulled back, as if the shadows were warning me to stop. I had to keep going. The truth lay just beyond reach, like a whisper in the dark. But what awaited me at the end of this path? I spent the night consumed by the photo. Each time I closed my eyes, the sad eyes of the child haunted me, a reminder that I had to dig deeper. The mention of new families troubled me. Where had these children gone? Why had they vanished without a trace? In the morning, I returned to the library, my mind racing with questions. I needed to find more information about Elizabeth Winslow. Maybe she knew something. I asked the librarian for more records on her, but her expression tightened. "Some histories shouldn't be unraveled," she warned again. Ignoring her caution, I combed through the files, looking for anything that might connect Elizabeth to the children. In one folder, I found a faded letter addressed to her from an unknown sender. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible, but it spoke of a hidden truth and the need to be careful. It ended with a chilling line. "The children are connected to the past in ways you can't imagine." I began to piece together what this might mean. The fire, the disappearances, the warning words. It felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, and I was determined to find them all. That evening, I decided to visit what remained of one of the Winslow orphanages. As I approached the site, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The building was charred and abandoned, a hollowed shell of its former self. I stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath me. Dust motes floated in the air, and an unnatural chill lingered. My flashlight illuminated the dark corners, and I felt drawn to a room at the end of the hall. As I entered, I spotted a small trunk, old and worn. My heart raced as I knelt beside it. Would it hold artifacts from the children? Would it give me answers? But before I could open it, I heard a sound, a soft giggle. It echoed in the empty space like a memory long forgotten. I jerked my head around, but saw nothing. Just shadows playing tricks. Panic set in, but I shook it off. Maybe it was just the wind. I forced myself to focus. I cried the trunk open, revealing a collection of dusty toys and tattered books. My hands trembled as I reached inside. Would I find something that belonged to the child from the photo? Then I found it. A small diary, its cover decorated with a childish drawing. Inside were scrawled notes, fragmented thoughts, and most importantly, lists of names. Names I recognized. The same names I had seen in the library. As I flipped through the pages, a chill ran down my spine. This diary held secrets that shouldn't be disturbed. Names of children who were supposed to be lost, connected by some unseen thread to the Winslow family. The whispers in my mind grew louder, urging me to leave. But I couldn't walk away now. I had uncovered too much, and there was still one last entry that caught my eye. It was dated the night before the fire. The words sent shivers through me. They're coming for us. I can feel it. We have to hide. In that moment, the air changed. A heavy presence filled the room, and I felt a chill creeping down my spine. Someone was watching me. I turned sharply, and my breath caught in my throat. A figure stood in the doorway, shrouded in the shadows. The color drained from my face. The truth was staring back at me, and it was a face I recognized all too well. I froze, my pulse racing. It couldn't be. The figure stepped into the dim light, and my heart sank. It was her, the child from the photo. The same sad eyes stared back at me, but now they were imbued with a haunting familiarity. "Why are you here?" Her voice was soft and trembled slightly, as if she were afraid of being heard. Confusion washed over me. You're not supposed to be here. None of us should be here," she whispered. I struggled to process her words. You're the girl from the picture. How are you here?" My voice cracked. The diary and its ominous warnings flooded my mind. Was she one of the lost children? Did she need my help? "I don't know how much time we have." She glanced around nervously, her face pale. "They're always watching. You have to leave before it's too late." "Who's watching? What do you mean?" I stepped closer, but she recoiled slightly. "No, you can't come any closer," she insisted. "You must understand. Once you start asking, they'll find you too." I felt a mixture of disbelief and fear. "I found your diary. It mentioned hiding. What were you all hiding from?" At the mention of the diary, her expression changed. Her eyes widened with alarm. "You shouldn't have touched it," she said urgently. "That's how it starts. The truth is dangerous. You have to listen to me." I shook my head, feeling a weight settle in my chest. "I can't just leave. I need to know what happened to you and the others." She gave me a sad smile, one that betrayed centuries of loss. "There's no way to understand without knowing the truth, but the truth comes at a cost." Before I could respond, a creak echoed through the orphanage, followed by a distinct whisper. "Time is running out." It was a voice, low and ominous, reverberating through the hollow rooms. The walls seemed to close in around us, and the air became thick with dread. "Please," I whispered, desperate, "help me. We can figure this out together." "I can't," the girl replied, tears in her eyes. "You have to go now." She stepped back toward the shadows, her form flickering like a candle about to be snuffed out. "Wait!" I cried, lunging forward, but she faded into the darkness, her presence echoing in my mind. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, drowning out my thoughts. I stumbled back, debating my next move. I couldn't just leave. There had to be something more here, some hidden truth I needed to uncover. Instinct told me the diary was key, but I had no idea how deep the danger ran. Then I realized I heard more than whispers. Footsteps were approaching, slow and deliberate. Someone was coming. Panic surged through me. I had to make a choice, fight or flee. As the door creaked open, I caught a glimpse of shadowy figures slipping through the entrance. It was now or never. Would I stand my ground and confront the threat, or would I retreat into the unknown? My heart raced even faster as I scrambled for an escape. The moment the door swung open, a rush of cold air swept through the room. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. There were 3 figures, their outlines barely visible in the dim light. They moved with purpose, like wolves on a hunt, scanning the room. I ducked behind a worn-out armchair, its fabric frayed and dust-laden, praying that I would not be seen. It was too quiet. They exchanged glances that spoke of secrets and shared knowledge. I held my breath, straining to hear their whispers. "Did you hear her?" one of them said, a low, gravelly voice that sent shivers down my spine. "She's still here, somewhere." I couldn't see their faces, but I sensed their intent. They were hunting for me, or for something I didn't understand. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, mixing with the panic surging in my veins. I needed to move. I glanced around for another exit, but the room felt like it was closing in on me. The fading sunlight filtered through the cracked window, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. There was no way I could stay hidden for long. In a flash, I spotted a narrow hallway leading deeper into the dark confines of the orphanage. I made a split-second decision. Quietly, I crept toward it, doing my best to avoid the creaky floorboards. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard a voice behind me, sharper than the others. "She's here! Search the upstairs!" My heart raced faster. I dashed down the hallway, desperate to create distance between me and those figures. As I rushed forward, I noticed the walls were lined with faded photographs. Children in old-fashioned clothes, their smiles bright yet unsettling, cast under the same sad glow as the girl from the picture. "What happened to you?" I whispered to the ghosts frozen in time. Each image felt like a warning, every child's gaze filled with anguish. Then I remembered the girl's words, "Once you start asking, they'll find you too." But I wasn't done asking. I had to know. I reached the end of the hallway and stumbled into a small room. The air was musty, filled with the scent of mildew. Old toys littered the floor, their colors diminished. And on the far wall I saw it, a large, dusty mirror reflecting not just the room, but something else. That's when I saw it. In the mirror's glass, shadows swirled, gathering like storm clouds ready to burst. I wasn't alone. The figures were closer than I thought, their distorted shapes creeping nearer. I felt a pull, a strange urge to step closer, to see what waited beyond the reflection. But I hesitated. The girl's voice echoed in my mind, "You have to go now." I had to make a choice. What was this mirror showing me? Was it a portal, an escape, or something worse? I felt a chill creep down my spine as I abandoned the thought of safety. Just then, I heard footsteps closing in from the hallway. There was no going back. I had to know what lay beyond that glass before they found me. I took a deep breath and reached out toward the mirror's icy surface. The moment my fingers brushed against the mirror, I was met with an icy shock that coursed through my body. A soft shimmer rippled across the surface, distorting my reflection. I gasped, pulled back, and felt my heart hammering in my chest. What had I just touched? I glanced over my shoulder. The footsteps were closer now, echoing ominously in the confined space. I didn't have much time. I squinted into the glass again, bracing myself. Suddenly, a voice called from the hallway, chilling me to the bone. "We know you're in there." The gravelly tone was back, heavy with menace. My body screamed at me to run, but the pull of the mirror was stronger.
In that moment, I made a choice. Whatever lay beyond was better than facing those figures. I stepped closer, steeling myself, and pressed my palm against the mirror once more. The surface quivered, and before I could think twice, I was yanked forward, swallowed by the glass. A rush of coldness enveloped me, weightless and surreal. I felt as if
I was floating in darkness, surrounded by muffled whispers that swirled around me. I reached out, trying to grasp something solid, but there was nothing. No walls, no ground, just the shadows whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. Then, like a candle flickering to life, images began to form around me. I was back in the orphanage, but this time it felt different. The light was brighter, and laughter echoed in the halls. Children, alive and filled with joy, played among each other. They were the same children from the faded photographs, their faces radiant and carefree. But my relief was short-lived. I scanned the room for answers. I heard the same girl from the picture, her voice sweet yet haunting. "Help us," she said, her expression no longer joyful. "You have to help us find the truth." "What truth?" I asked, confusion swirling in my mind. "What happened to you?" "They took us," she whispered, her eyes darkening with a sadness that crushed me. "They took our names, our lives. No one remembers us." Before I could respond, the laughter faded, replaced by a dreadful silence. The darkness began creeping in around us like an insatiable predator. Panic rose within me as I spun around. The shadows, the figures, they were here, hovering at the edges of this newfound realm. "Get out," the girl urged. "They'll find us here." I turned to run, but the shadows rushed forward, enveloping me. I felt a hand grasp my wrist, and icy fingers curled around my throat. "Stay with us," a whisper hissed in my ear. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the darkness. My instincts took over. I had to escape. I had to get back to the mirror. With every ounce of strength, I bolted back, maneuvering through the heavy shadows that clung to my ankles. I could see it, the mirror, looming ahead like a lifeline. But just as I reached for it, I felt the grip on my wrist tighten. I looked back, momentarily frozen by the sight. The figures were closer now, their faces half-formed, twisted in a hunger that paralyzed me with fear. I had to decide, face the darkness or leap into the unknown. With a final breath, I lunged, desperate to break free. I burst through the mirror's surface, tumbling out into the dim light of the cramped storage room. My breath came in sharp gasps as I hit the cold wooden floor. The shadows clung to me like cold fingers, reluctant to let go as I turned to look back. The mirror stood eerily still, reflecting my disheveled figure and the swirling darkness just beyond it. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing. My sanctuary felt vulnerable. I needed to gather my thoughts, but fear gripped me. I had escaped, yet I couldn't shake the girl's haunting voice or the pressing danger of the dark figures. Then a muffled sound drew my attention. It came from the other side of the room. Peering over stacks of old boxes and dusty furniture, I spotted a small door, almost hidden. It looked like it led to a hallway. With a sense of urgency, I approached, my instincts screaming that I needed answers. Just as I reached the door, I hesitated. What if it led to more dangers? But the whispers from the mirror echoed in my mind. "Help us," they begged. I couldn't ignore them. With a quick shove, I opened the door. It creaked loudly, the sound reverberating in the stillness. I stepped into the narrow passageway, which felt like it was closing in around me. Walls painted a dull, peeling white. Flickering fluorescent lights cast shadows that danced quickly, a direct reflection of my thoughts. I moved cautiously, each footstep quiet against the cracked linoleum. To my left, I noticed a row of old lockers, each marred with rust and grime. I reached for one, hoping for something, anything, that could help me figure this out. But as my fingers grasped the handle, I heard a noise down the hallway. A soft shuffling, followed by a grunt. My heart raced again, pounding like a drum.
I pulled away from the locker, knowing I wasn't alone. I had to act quickly. "Hello?" I called hesitantly, my voice trembling. The shuffling stopped. I strained to see further down the hall, but it was shrouded in shadow. "Who's there?" I demanded, louder this time. But my voice echoed back at me, empty and unanswered. Then, to my left, I noticed something glinting at the bottom of an open locker. My curiosity battled against my instinct to run. I took a cautious step toward it, crouching to see what lay within. That's when I saw it. A small, gilt picture frame, tarnished and covered with dust. Inside was a faded photo. Children. They looked familiar. My breath caught as I recognized the same faces from the mirror, smiling, alive once again. But as I studied it closer, a chill swept through me. At the bottom of the frame, a name was scrawled. Jessica Winslow. Suddenly the shuffling noise returned, louder this time. There was no time left. I yanked the photo from the locker, and as I turned to flee down the corridor, I felt the darkness close in behind me. My pulse thundered in my ears as I sprinted down the narrow corridor. The picture frame clutched tightly in my hand. I could feel the weight of its revelation drumming against my chest. Jessica Winslow. The name seemed like a key to a locked door I hadn't even realized existed. But there was no time to ponder it. The shuffling was louder now, and each breath I took fed the fear that clawed at my insides. I dashed past a few more lockers, the dull metal flashing by like a blur. I reached the end of the hallway, where I found another door, slightly ajar. My instincts kicked in. I pushed it open, holding my breath. The hinges creaked, but it was a sweet sound, compared to the noise behind me. Stepping through, I emerged into a larger room, and my eyes scanned frantically for any means of escape. There were more lockers, filing cabinets, and a single large window that was cracked and dirty. Suddenly, a shadow flickered behind me. I spun around, nearly losing my footing. Then I saw him. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the weak corridor light. He was tall, wearing a dark coat that draped around him like a shroud. My skin prickled as a chill ran through me. I took a cautious step back, clutching the photo tightly. "Who are you?" I managed to call, my voice barely above a whisper, the words trembling on my tongue. He tilted his head, and though I couldn't see his expression clearly, I felt his gaze bore into me. "You should not be here," he replied, his voice low and gravelly. "This place isn't safe." "Neither is the mirror," I shot back, surprised by the defiance in my tone. "I saw people in there. I have to find them." He stepped closer, and I could see a hint of desperation in his posture. "Don't you understand? They're trapped, just like you will be if you stay. You must leave now." Before I could process his words, shadows spilled around him like dark smoke, swirling and thickening. "You need to listen," he shouted, his voice rising above the growing chaos. The shadows reached for me, tendrils of darkness that felt alive. Panic surged through me, and I bolted towards the window. I had to escape. The glass cracked ominously under my grasp, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. The lockers toppled to one side, sending dust and debris exploding into the air. The man shouted in agony, and the shadows pulled him back, dragging him into the engulfing darkness. I stood frozen, fear paralyzing me. But recalling the children's faces, especially Jessica's, rekindled my determination. I had to know more. I had to help them. Perhaps there was a way to break whatever held them there. Just then, I caught sight of something glimmering beneath a pile of debris, half buried but unmistakable. A key. I had no idea what it opened, but in that moment it felt like my lifeline. I lunged toward it, my fingers scraping across the cracked floor, grasping the cold metal as shadows roared behind me. I turned, ready to confront whatever lurked in that darkness, my heart racing. I still had questions, and I had to find answers, no matter the cost. My fingers curled around the key, the cold metal grounding me as the shadows continued to writhe in the corners of the room. The figure's warning echoed in my mind. This place wasn't safe. But I couldn't just run away. Not when I felt the pull of those trapped souls, especially Jessica's. I shoved the key into my pocket, its presence a small comfort. I had to find
a way to free them. Maybe there was a door or lock that could lead me to answers. Maybe I would find the truth about Jessica and the others. With a surge of courage, I scanned the room once more. The lockers felt like they held secrets. They towered high, their doors slightly ajar, like mouths waiting to exhale hidden truths. The filing cabinets were old and rusty, each drawer closed tightly as if guarding their contents. I had no time to waste. I approached the nearest locker, heart pounding. I tugged on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I cursed under my breath and tried again, this time yanking it with more force. The door creaked open, groaning as if it resented my intrusion. My heart sank when I saw it was empty. "Come on," I whispered, desperation creeping into my voice. "There has to be something." I moved to the next one and gave it a harder pull, but just as I did, another crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. The shadows shifted again, teasing me with their proximity. I glanced back toward the doorway where the figure had stood. My instinct screamed for me to flee, but curiosity held me in place. "What do you want?" I shouted, hating the tremor in my voice. "What do you want from me?" Silence fell, but it was heavy, pregnant with unanswered questions. I turned back to the lockers, pushing aside my fear. Each click of a handle echoed like a drum in my ears. My fingers moved faster, checking each one fervently. My breath mingled with dust in the air, the stale scent of neglect surrounding me. Then, as I pried open another locker, my heart stopped. A photo stared back at me, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. It wasn't just any photo. It was one of Jessica. But in the picture, her eyes were sad. She looked trapped even then. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and a dark swirl enveloped the photo in my hands. I stepped back, clutching the picture to my chest. "What do you want?" I yelled again, fear piercing through me. From the shadows, the figure emerged once more, his voice strained. "You're running out of time. You need to choose. Help them or leave." What was I supposed to do? Every instinct screamed to run, but the faces of the children clouded my mind. The photo felt like a lifeline, a connection to something real. I needed to find a way to move forward, to understand what all this meant. As I stood frozen between fear and resolve, something caught my eye in the corner of the room. Another door. It was small, barely visible in the dim light, but it seemed to pulse, as if alive. The key in my pocket felt heavier than before. I took a step toward the door, adrenaline fueling my movement. This time, I was ready to confront whatever lay beyond. I had to know what was hidden away. I had to know the truth. And as I reached for the door handle, I realized leaving wasn't an option anymore. The door creaked softly as I twisted the handle, revealing a narrow staircase winding downward into darkness. The air felt different here, dense and electric, like the calm before a storm. Every instinct urged me to turn back, but the weight of Jessica's name, intertwined with the key in my pocket, propelled me forward. Whatever awaited me couldn't be worse than the shadows that felt so alive behind me. I descended cautiously, the musty smell intensifying with each step. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, the silence around me punctuated by the occasional creaks and whispers of the building settling.
Flickering overhead lights fought against the encroaching dark, casting shapes that danced on the walls. It felt like they were beckoning me down deeper into their depths. At the bottom, I found myself in a basement that smelled of damp earth and decay. Faint rays of light penetrated through grime-covered windows, casting dim shadows that swirled around the space. My pulse quickened as I noticed several old trunks lined against the walls, some cracked open as if their contents had been briefly disturbed. I approached them one by one, feeling like a tomb raider sifting through the remnants of lives long forgotten. The first trunk held only tattered clothes and a few dusty toys. The second contained crumpled papers that seemed meaningless. And then, there it was. The third trunk glinted under the dim light, attracting me like a moth to a flame. I unlatched it, breath held, as the lid creaked open. Inside lay a collection of old photographs, carefully stacked one atop the other. I leaned in, trembling. They were all children, smiling innocently, posing in front of buildings, some even holding hands. The faces were so familiar, yet they were enveloped in an unsettling happiness. I began flipping through the stack frantically, searching for any sign of Jessica, any clue about the connection binding them all. One photo caught my breath. There she was again, a young Jessica, but now she looked happy, surrounded by friends. I couldn't help but smile. But then it hit me like a punch to the gut. It was dated just days before the fire. Why were they smiling? What did they know? Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A low murmur filled the room. I spun around, heart racing, as the shadows thickened. They absorbed the dim light, flickers of movement dancing on the edge of my vision. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me with an urgency that clawed at my insides. "Help us!" a voice cried, cutting through the murmur. I felt a jolt of panic. It was Jessica's voice. "You have to help us!" "Help you? How?" I called out, my hands gripping the edge of the trunk. Behind me, the shadows coalesced into figures, limbs stretching and twisting, dark faces hovering just at the
periphery. "They are watching," a voice rasped. "They won't let you leave until you know." I shook my head, breathing heavily. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. One figure stepped into the light, its features indistinguishable, but eerily familiar. It was the man I had seen before, now etched in darkness. "The truth has been buried for too long. It's time you uncover what the Winslows did." "What did they do?" I pleaded. "Find the last child." The figure's voice cracked like thunder, and the shadows seemed to pulse in answer, a shiver of collective importance. They were never meant to be lost. Before I could respond, the room began to shake. Bookshelves rattled, and the shadows surged forward, mingling with the echoes of laughter and cries. I clutched the photograph of Jessica, trying to anchor myself in this whirlwind of confusion. But the energy swirled, threatening to drown me. Then, out of the chaos, the safe door I had come through slammed shut, locking me in. Panic rose again like bile in my throat. I was trapped. "Find Jessica," the figure pleaded, stretching their arms toward me with urgency. "Her power lies in the truth. Find the door before it's too late." As shadows surged around me, I understood. My eyes darted to the trunk, where the photographs wafted like whispers in the wind. The last child was my key out. I tossed the dressings aside, eyes scanning the photos, desperate for guidance. If Jessica was a part of this, then somewhere within those images was the path to breaking the cycle. I couldn't give in to fear. I had to act. In one swift moment, I recalled the small door I had seen upstairs. Could it lead to another world, another chance? I took a deep breath, holding the picture firmly, its familiarity giving me strength. Then I called out, louder than the crashing shadows, "Jessica, I won't abandon you. Show me the way." Just as the shadows began to close in, I felt the trunk pulse with warmth, revealing a glimmering light that enveloped the photographs. I dove at the flicker, hoping it would guide me to the hidden truth. I stumbled back as light engulfed me, and all at once I was scooped up and thrust into a rush of memories. The children, the laughter, their hidden joys, and everything exploded into clarity. There it was, a door ajar at the end of the corridor. Jessica and the others stood beyond, their outlines shimmering in anticipation. The shadows writhed, fighting against the light that beckoned me. I reached for the threshold, breaking through into another world where the sun shone higher. I turned back one last time. The darkness writhed like a storm behind me, yet in my hands I held Jessica's photograph. The truth remained entwined in those images, urging me to uncover the stories that still lingered. And though I had escaped momentarily, a shadow of uncertainty hung over me. The question of what had
truly happened, and what would happen to those lost, would linger beyond me, like a melody floating on the wind. I had survived, for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my journey was just beginning.